Confronted the man who manipulated me as a child, debated reporting him, fearing disbelief and the lack of evidence. Trigger warnings. Grooming, child sexual abuse, drug use, emotional manipulation, mood spoilers. Hopeful and encouraging. I recently turned 18, I am also male BTW, and I grew up in foster care from the age of 8. When in year 7 I met this guy who I'll call Jake on an app called Whisper that I had on my iPad. We first spoke on there and then we moved over to an app called Kick. At the time he told me that he was 18 but I have no realistic way to prove that, but he didn't look much older if he was lying. We started meeting up in secret not long after that. I was instructed to keep it secret, which I did. At this point I was living in a residential home and I had really bad behavior. I have matured out of this now, but at the time I was literally doing whatever I wanted. Jake would meet up with me and he'd bring me alcohol and weed, and other drugs. At the time I thought it was a genuine friendship, and so when he told me not to tell anyone about him I didn't. I was sexually abused by my dad when I was living with my biological family and I really struggled with making friends in school because I had really bad behavior and would lash out at people often. I think that made me an easier target to Jake. Jake and I started a secret relationship. It started out as just being friends but obviously he twisted it into more and we had sex several times, from as young as 12 and he used to make me pretend he was my dad and I can't be certain but I think he may have recorded this. I can't really describe why I went through with this, because I was never forced into anything. I did everything with my consent, which until recently I thought meant it was all okay. But I understand now that I was being manipulated and that I could not give proper consent. Jake stopped contacting me when I was around 14, about the same time as I moved in my former foster parents, who used to check my technology regularly and started really putting in boundaries for the first time in my life. Which I told him about and he told me to delete all messages of us talking and to delete the Kick app altogether. So I no longer have any physical evidence of what happened, apart from a few selfies we took. But no proof of the grooming, or that we had sexual relationship. I no longer have any of the message logs on either Kick or Whisper. I don't want to go into too much detail on here, but that's a brief overview of what happened to me. There are a lot more details that I purposefully left out. But if anything didn't make sense or you need more information, please ask. As I mentioned, I grew up in foster care. I have a very good relationship with my former foster parents. I can't speak to them about this because if I do I know they will legally have to report it, and I am honestly a bit worried about doing that. I have never told anyone about any of this, and I am really worried about how people will react. I know that my former foster parent will have to report it if I tell them about this. But I don't even know how to bring it up with them. It's not like someone speaking to a real parent who I could just ask advice about. It becomes a huge thing and they would have to report it. I am not sure I want to report it because I have no evidence of anything happening and I feel like people aren't going to believe me. I'm not really sure what I'm expecting from you guys, but maybe someone who understands the legal process a bit could tell me what would happen if I decided to report this? Would they go and question him? What would the police get me to do? Would they be at all likely to act? Because if they aren't going to do anything then I think I would prefer to keep it to myself. Remember, I have no evidence of anything happening. Edit. I'm going to sleep now. If anyone responds to me I will see in morning. Thank you. First of all, I strongly believe you should report this. I don't know whether you're traumatized by what happened to you or not, but even if you aren't reporting it, may he protecting other young children from harm. There could be more victims right now. I don't think you have anything to lose by reporting it. I don't know why people wouldn't believe you, but even if they didn't, so what? Fuck them. The police will believe you and take you seriously, and that's all that matters. It may be that there's nothing the police can do to track down Jake, but equally maybe there are logs etc. they can get their hands on to find him. As I said, ultimately nothing might come of this, but also ultimately you may help other young vulnerable boys. You can report this if you want to. As you're 18, there's no obligation on your part to inform your foster parents of this, even if you informed the police or went to court. Unless there is some legislation regarding foster families that I'm not aware of. I wasn't forced into things either, but it doesn't mean it isn't wrong on some level or not harmful, and it still involved taking advantage of a vulnerable young person in your case. You'd begin by speaking to the police and providing a statement of what happened. You are essentially a witness, so your statement is a form of evidence in and of itself. They would then speak to him and hear what he has to say about your statement. They would seize any devices such as phones, cameras, discs, memory cards etc. as those may contain further evidence. He may not be charged immediately following this initial interview if they don't find enough evidence to take to the Crown Prosecution Service. In this case he may be bailed or released under investigation pending further inquiries. If the CPS believe there is a realistic prospect of conviction for one or more offenses, then they will authorize charges against him and he'd have the opportunity to plead guilty or not guilty in court. If he admits the charges, he'll be convicted and sentenced appropriately. Depending on the offenses, he may go to prison. He'll definitely be added to the sex offenders register. If he pleads not guilty, then you would have to give evidence in court in front of a jury where the prosecutor will take you through your statement and ask you questions about it. His defense lawyer will do essentially the same. At the end, the jury will retire to consider the evidence and return either a guilty or not guilty verdict. If he's guilty, then the above applies. If he's found not guilty, then he'd walk free from court and wouldn't be punished. If he's found not guilty, It doesn't necessarily mean that the jury didn't believe you, it means that they felt the CPS hadn't proved the defendant's guilt beyond reasonable doubt. Although I appreciate that wouldn't make you feel any better about it. Your name would never be released in newspapers or social media. You should consider talking all this through with a therapist for a few sessions. If you can't afford to pay for one privately, £40 to £180 per session, then you can approach your GP for help and they can refer you to NHS therapists, but there'd likely be a long waiting list for that. You can also try charities such as Survivors UK. Update 1. I wanted to post to say thank you to everyone who sent me advice and love on my last post. I really appreciated everyone trying to be so helpful and kind to me. I decided that I needed to tell my former foster carers about what happened to me when I was younger. It was a really awkward conversation to have. And it was honestly the most difficulty thing I've had to be open about, even more than coming out as bisexual. Before I could even say what happened, I broke down crying, like sobbing, and I have never cried in front of them before. I don't even know why I started to cry, because it's not like anything that happened to me even bothers me at all anymore. I spent years trying to get over the booze from my dad, and I have gotten over it. It doesn't bother me at all anymore. I never even considered what Jake did to me as abuse until recently, and it doest hurt me, so I'm not sure why I was crying. I don't usually cry like that. My foster carers encouraged me to go to the police to make a report, which I did with their support. It was a really strange process, and they told me they can't make any predictions about whether or not anything will actually come of my accusation. And they said either way it's going to take a while. Which I think is normal. The police took me seriously, thank God. And they were not put off by the fact I had no evidence of anything. They asked if I still had the iPad which I used to talk to Jake on, but sadly I don't. I want to say, if anyone out there is reading this and is in a similar situation to myself, please come forward, please don't be silent. The police in my experience will take you seriously. Thank you all, I'm going to sleep now.